Every day begins with a story. Welcome to NaaWrites, where love is never simple. The first rule Kang Taehyun set after the divorce was simple. Minjun comes first. Everything else came after. Feelings, pride, pain, even love. The black car pulled to a slow stop in front of the Han residence, its polished surface reflecting the evening lights. The gates had already opened before the driver even stepped out. Security recognized the vehicle immediately. Of course they did. Kang Taehyun never needed permission to enter. Not here. Not anymore. Not after everything. Inside the car, Kang Minjun pressed a small face against the window, eyes lighting up. Papa's house. Taehyun glanced at him from the side, his expression softening despite himself. You were just there 3 days ago. That was long ago. Minjun said seriously. Taehyun huffed a quiet laugh. 5 years old, and already dramatic. Just like he stopped the thought before it could finish. The car door opened. Minjun didn't wait. He jumped out immediately and ran toward the entrance. Papa. The doors opened before he could reach them. And there, standing under the warm light of the entrance hall, was Lee Ji-hoon. For a moment, time did something strange. It slowed. Not because they hadn't seen each other. They had. Too many times to count. Drop-offs. Pickups. Short conversations. Always brief. Always controlled. Always distant. But tonight, something felt different. Ji-hoon crouched immediately, catching Minjun as he ran into his arms. You're early, he said softly, his voice calm, warm, familiar. Minjun hugged him tightly. I missed you. Ji-hoon smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to his hair. I miss you too. Taehyun stepped out of the car slowly. His gaze lifted, and met Ji-hoon's. There was that same quiet tension. Not loud, not explosive, but heavy, like something unfinished. Taehyun, Ji-hoon said. Ji-hoon! No smiles, no warmth, but not cold either. Just careful. Minjun, completely unaware of emotional complications, grabbed both their hands. Come inside. Neither of them refused. The house hadn't changed. Still elegant. Still quiet. Still his. Taehyun walked in like he always did. Like someone who used to belong there and still didn't know if he did. Because the truth was, part of him never left. Minjun ran ahead toward the living room, already talking about something excitedly. Ji-hoon stood near the entrance, watching Taehyun take off his coat. For a second, they were alone. You look tired, Ji-hoon said. Taehyun didn't look at him. Work. You always say that. It's always true. A pause. You've been working too much, Ji-hoon added quietly. That made Taehyun look at him. Really look. And for a moment, something old flickered. Because Ji-hoon used to say that in a different tone. Softer. Closer. You're not in a position to worry about me, Taehyun said. Ji-hoon didn't react. He just nodded once. I know. That answer was worse than an argument. Minjun's voice echoed from inside. Appa, Papa, come. They moved at the same time. And just like that, the moment passed. Dinner was already prepared. Of course it was. Ji-hoon was like that. Everything planned. Everything controlled. Everything perfect. Minjun sat between them, swinging his legs happily. This is the best day, he announced. Taehyun raised a brow. Why? Because you're both here. Silence. Brief. Sharp. Ji-hoon picked up his glass. Eat your food. Minjun obeyed. The rest of dinner went like always. Normal. Too normal. Conversations about school. About work. About schedules. Like two people who had learned how to exist without touching anything real. Until Minjun spoke again. Papa, he said, looking at Ji-hoon, why don't you live with us? The fork in Taehyun's hand paused. Ji-hoon didn't answer immediately. Because Appa and I live separately now. Why? Children never stop. Ji-hoon glanced at Taehyun, just for a second, then back at Minjun. Sometimes adults don't understand each other. Minjun frowned. Then understand. Taehyun let out a short breath. If it was that easy, we would have. Minjun looked between them, then said something that made both men freeze. You still look at each other. Silence. What do you mean? Ji-hoon asked softly. Minjun shrugged. Like you want to say something. Taehyun looked away. Ji-hoon didn't. Dinner ended quietly after that. Later that night, Minjun fell asleep on the couch between them, his small body curled slightly, one hand still holding on to Ji-hoon's sleeve. Taehyun stood first. I'll take him. Ji-hoon nodded, but when Taehyun bent to carry him, Minjun tightened his grip unconsciously. Papa. Ji-hoon's hand instinctively moved, then stopped. Taehyun noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. Come, Taehyun said. Ji-hoon looked at him. What? Help me. It was small, simple, but wasn't something they usually did. Ji-hoon hesitated, then stepped forward. Together, they carried their son to his room. For a moment, it felt like before. After Minjun was tucked in, neither of them left immediately. They stood there, in silence, in the soft glow of the night lamp. He looks like you more, Taehyun said. Ji-hoon shook his head. He has your eyes. A pause. He asked me yesterday. Jaehoon said quietly, if we used to love each other. Taehyun's chest tightened. And what did you say? Jaehoon looked at Minjun, then answered. I said yes. Taehyun swallowed, and he asked. Jaehoon finally looked at him, and this time there was no distance. He asked me why we stopped. Silence. Taehyun looked away. Did you answer? Jaehoon's voice dropped. I didn't know how that was the truth. They stepped out of the room, closed the door gently, and for the first time that night they were completely alone. The tension changed. Not sharp anymore, not distant, but something deeper. Taehyun, Jaehoon said, that tone. It made Taehyun stop. We need to talk. Taehyun let out a quiet breath. About what? Jaehoon held his gaze. About that night. Everything in Taehyun went still. There's nothing to talk about. Yes, there is. Taehyun's jaw tightened. I saw everything. Jaehoon, no. Jaehoon said, you didn't. That made Taehyun angry. Don't do that, he snapped. Don't act like I imagined it. I'm not, Jaehoon replied calmly. I'm saying what you saw. Wasn't real. Silence. What? Taehyun said slowly. Jaehoon took a step closer. Not too close. Just enough. I didn't cheat on you. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Dangerous. Taehyun laughed once. Cold. Sharp. You expect me to believe that after 5 years, Jaehoon didn't move. I expect you to listen. And something about that, something steady, something sure, made Taehyun pause. Because Jaehoon wasn't defensive, wasn't panicking, wasn't lying. He was certain. Explain, Taehyun said. And this time he didn't walk away. Jaehoon exhaled slowly, then said the one thing that changed everything. It was arranged. Taehyun's expression darkened. By who? Jaehoon's voice dropped. My family. Silence. And just like that, the past started to break open. For a moment, Taehyun thought he misheard him. My family. Jaehoon repeated quietly, as if saying it again would make it easier to believe. The photos, the witness, the entire situation. It was all set up. Taehyun's expression didn't change, but the air around him did. Dangerous. Still. Explain properly, he said. Jaehoon nodded once, as if he expected nothing less. That night, I was called to a private meeting. I was told it was urgent, something about a joint investment deal that needed my approval. The location was changed last minute to that hotel. Taehyun remembered. He remembered the message. He remembered waiting. He remembered the anger. I went, Jaehoon continued. But when I got there, the room was empty. I thought I had the wrong suite. I stayed for a while, made calls. No one answered. I left. Taehyun's eyes narrowed. That doesn't explain the photos. Jaehoon's lips pressed together slightly. It was staged. The person in those photos. It wasn't even me in most of them. Just someone who looked similar from a distance. The close ones were edited. That's ridiculous. Taehyun snapped. I saw you. You saw what they wanted you to see. Taehyun stepped closer. Then why didn't you fight harder? His voice rose. Why didn't you prove it back then? Jaehoon didn't flinch. Because you didn't give me the chance. That landed. Hard. You had already decided. Jaehoon continued. You were angry. You were hurt. And I understand that. But every time I tried to explain, you shut me out. Taehyun's breathing became uneven. Memories hit him all at once. Jaehoon standing in front of him, trying to speak, trying to reach him, and him walking away. Every time. I thought you betrayed me. Taehyun said, quieter now? I thought everything we had meant nothing to you. Jaehoon's eyes softened. It meant everything to me. Silence. You were my husband. Jaehoon added, voice low. You were the only person I ever chose without hesitation. Taehyun's chest tightened. And Minjun, he asked. Jaehoon's expression broke slightly. He was our everything. Past tense. Taehyun noticed. And it hurt. Then why didn't you take him? Taehyun demanded suddenly. Why didn't you fight for him in court? Jaehoon looked away briefly, then back. Because you needed him more. That's not your decision to make. I know, Jaehoon said quickly. But at that time you were angry. You were unstable. And he paused, his voice lowering. I didn't want to make things worse for him. Taehyun froze. Unstable. He remembered that version of himself. The anger, the sleepless nights, the way everything felt like it was falling apart. You thought I couldn't take care of him, he asked. No, Jaehoon said immediately. I knew you could. That's why I let you. Let you, not lost, not taken, given. That realization hit Taehyun harder than anything else. For 5 years, he thought Jaehoon didn't care enough to fight. But maybe Jaehoon cared too much. The silence between them shifted. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was heavy, full. Why are you telling me this now? Taehyun asked. Jaehoon exhaled slowly. Because I finally have proof. He reached into his bag and pulled out a file. Taehyun stared at it. Didn't take it immediately. I don't want assumptions this time, Jaehoon said. I don't want emotions. Just look at it. Taehyun hesitated. Then took it. Inside, documents. Transaction records. Security footage stills. Statements. Everything. Taehyun's eyes scanned quickly. Then slower. Then again, the timestamps didn't match. The angles were wrong. The signatures. Forged. His grip tightened on the file. This is real, he asked. Yes. You're sure? I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. Tae-hyun closed the file slowly. His mind was loud. Too loud. Because if this was true, then everything he built his anger on was a lie. I ruined everything, he said under his breath. Jehun's eyes flickered. You didn't ruin it alone. Tae-hyun looked at him sharply. You're still defending me? I'm being honest, Jehun replied. We both made mistakes. Tae-hyun laughed bitterly. You call that a mistake? I call it pain. Jehun said quietly. That word. Silence him, Tae-hyun. Jehun continued, taking a careful step closer. We were both hurting. We both reacted. And we both lost something important because of it. Tae-hyun looked at him, long hard. Do you regret it? He asked. Jehun didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer came too fast. Too real. Every day, Jehun added. Tae-hyun looked away, because something in his chest was starting to break. Min-jun asked me something today. Tae-hyun said. Jehun's gaze softened instantly. What? He asked why you don't live with us. Jehun inhaled quietly. I see. He said we still look at each other. Jehun didn't speak, because that was true. Do you still love me? Tae-hyun asked suddenly. The question surprised even him. Jehun froze. Then, slowly, he answered. Yes. No hesitation. No fear. No hiding. Just truth. Tae-hyun's heart pounded. Because after everything, after 5 years, after all the anger, he still wasn't over him either. That's not enough, Tae-hyun said. Jehun nodded. I know. I can't just go back like nothing happened. I'm not asking you to. A pause. I just want a chance, Jehun said softly, to be part of his life properly. And maybe he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Tae-hyun understood. This doesn't fix everything, Tae-hyun said. It doesn't. Jehun agreed. But it changes things. That was a beginning. Jehun looked at him carefully. Does it? Tae-hyun exhaled slowly, then said, Stay tonight. Jehun blinked. What? Min-jun will be happy if you're there when he wakes up. Jehun stared at him, trying to understand. This is for him. Tae-hyun added quickly, but they both knew it wasn't just for him. Jehun nodded slowly. Okay, and just like that, the distance between them shifted. Not gone, not healed, but no longer as far as before. That night, for the first time in 5 years, they were under the same roof, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as something uncertain, something fragile, something that could either break again or finally be rebuilt. And in the quiet of the night, neither of them slept, because healing was never simple. But for the first time, it felt possible. Morning came quietly. Soft light slipped through the curtains, stretching across the polished floors and up the walls like something gentle trying not to disturb the peace. But peace was not something either of them truly had. Tae-hyun hadn't slept, not even for a second. He had stayed in his room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Jehun said, every document he saw, every memory he thought he understood. And the worst part was realizing he might have been wrong. All this time, across the hall, Jehun hadn't slept either. He sat on the edge of the guest bed, hands loosely clasped, his mind restless. Being here again, in this house, in Tae-hyun's space, it felt too familiar, like stepping back into something he was never ready to lose. A small sound broke the silence, a door creaking open, then light footsteps. Min-jun, the boy rubbed his eyes sleepily as he walked into the hallway. Appa? He called softly. No answer. Then, Papa? Jehun stood immediately, opening the door before the child could walk any further. Min-jun blinked, then froze. For a second, he just stared. Papa? Jehun's chest tightened. Yes. Min-jun's eyes widened. Then, without warning, he ran. Papa? Jehun barely had time to react before Min-jun crashed into him, arms wrapping tightly around his waist. I thought you left, the boy said, his voice small but full of relief. Jehun dropped to his knees instantly, pulling him into a proper embrace. I told you I wouldn't, he whispered. Min-jun pulled back slightly, still holding on to him. You stayed? Yes. Really stayed? Yes. The smile that spread across Min-jun's face was worth everything. Behind him, Tae-hyun stood at the end of the hallway, watching. He hadn't meant to stop, hadn't meant to stay there, but the sight in front of him, it held him in place. Jehun, holding their son, gently, carefully, like he always used to. And suddenly, Tae-hyun remembered. He remembered Jehun staying up late during pregnancy, reading books about parenting. He remembered Jehun arguing with doctors about nutrition. He remembered Jehun crying quietly the first time Min-jun got sick. Jehun had never been careless. Never. Appa, Tae-hyun blinked. Min-jun was looking at him now, eyes bright. Papa stayed. Tae-hyun nodded slowly. I can see that. Min-jun grabbed Jehun's hand, then Tae-hyun's, and pulled. Come. And just like that, they were together again, standing in the same space. Close. Too close. Breakfast felt different. Not forced. Not awkward, just new. Minjun talked nonstop. About school, about dreams, about a dinosaur that apparently could fly and swim at the same time. Jehun listened. Every word, Taehyun noticed. Of course he did. You remember everything he says? Taehyun asked at one point. Jehun glanced at him. Yes. A simple answer. But it said a lot. Taehyun looked away. You always did. A pause. Some things are hard to forget. Jehun replied quietly that wasn't just about Minjun. After breakfast, Minjun insisted they go out. Family day, he declared. Taehyun frowned slightly. You have school. I can skip? No, you can't. I already told teacher I might not come. Taehyun sighed. Jehun hid a smile. Fine. Taehyun said eventually. One day. Minjun cheered, and just like that, they were out together. The aquarium was crowded, bright, loud, full of life. Minjun ran ahead, pointing excitedly at everything. Look, fish. Yes, Taehyun said dryly. That is indeed fish. Jehun laughed softly, and Taehyun paused, because that sound, it still did something to him. They walked side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel it. At one point, Minjun ran ahead to press his hands against the glass of a large tank. Colorful fish swam past. Bright, free. Taehyun and Jehun stopped behind him. Watching, he's happy. Jehun said, yes. A pause. We could have had more of this. Jehun added. Taehyun's jaw tightened. I know. That was the first time they both admitted it. Regret. Minjun turned suddenly. Come. They moved again. Together. Later, Minjun got tired. Of course he did. 5-year-olds didn't have endless energy. Taehyun lifted him easily, resting him against his shoulder. Minjun yawned, then reached out lazily for Jehun. Jehun stepped closer without thinking, his hand brushing lightly against Taehyun's arm as he adjusted Minjun's position. That small touch, it froze both of them, because it felt too familiar. Jehun pulled back slightly, but not completely. You still carry him the same way, he said softly. Taehyun didn't look at him. You taught me. Jehun's breath hitched slightly. Another silence, but this one was softer. When they got back to the car, Minjun was already half asleep. Jehun reached out again, more carefully this time. Helping Taehyun settle him in, their hands brushed again. Longer. Neither of them moved immediately. Then Jehun stepped back. The moment passed. But not completely. Back at the house, Minjun was placed gently in bed. And once again they were alone. But this time, it wasn't the same kind of silence. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't distant. It was uncertain. Thank you, Jehun said. Taehyun looked at him. For what? For today? Taehyun shook his head slightly. That was for him. Jehun nodded. And for us? That question lingered. Taehyun didn't answer immediately, because he didn't know, or maybe he did, and just was ready to say it. Jehun stepped closer, slowly, carefully, not enough to touch. Just enough to feel. We can't go back, Taehyun said. I know, but he hesitated. We don't have to stay like this either. Jehun's eyes softened. That's all I'm asking. Silence. Then Taehyun did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He reached out. Not fully, not completely, but enough. His hand brushed lightly against Jehun's, and this time neither of them pulled away, because maybe, just maybe, some things were meant to end. They were just meant to be paused, and now they were starting again, not from beginning, but from something deeper, something stronger, something real. And as Jehun looked at Taehyun and Taehyun looked back, they both knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was a second chance, the one they almost never got, and this time they wouldn't waste it. The house was quiet again, too quiet. Minjun was asleep. The soft of the air conditioning, the only sound drifting through the hallway. The world outside still moved, cars, lights, distant voices, but inside the house, everything felt suspended, like time itself was waiting. Jehun didn't leave. He could have. He should have. But he didn't. Taehyun noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. You're still here, Taehyun said, his voice low as he stepped into the living room. Jehun stood near the window, the city lights reflecting faintly in his eyes. You didn't ask me to leave. That doesn't mean you should stay. Jehun gave a small, almost tired smile. You mean that? Taehyun didn't respond. Because he didn't. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with something else. We need to talk about us, Jehun said finally. Taehyun leaned against the arm of the sofa, arms crossing slowly. There is no us. Jehun didn't flinch. There was past tense. Maybe. That word again. Maybe. Taehyun exhaled slowly. You think saying sorry and showing me documents fixes 5 years? No, Jehun said immediately. I don't. Then what do you want? Jehun turned fully to face him. Not guarded, not distant, just honest. I want to try again. The words hit harder than any accusation. Taehyun laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Try again, he repeated. You say it like it's simple. I didn't say it was simple. It's not. I know. A pause. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. Jehun continued. I don't expect you to trust me immediately. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. Taehyun's eyes narrowed slightly. But Jehun took a step closer. But I know what we had wasn't fake. That was dangerous. Taehyun's voice dropped. You think love is enough? Jehun held his gaze. No. That answer surprised him. I think love is where we start. Jehun added quietly. Silence. Taehyun looked away. Because hearing that, after everything, it made something inside him shift again. You still believe in us, he asked. Jehun didn't hesitate. Yes. Another pause. And you don't? Jehun asked. Taehyun didn't answer. Not immediately. Because the truth was he didn't know. 5 years of anger. 5 years of distance. 5 years of convincing himself he didn't need Jehun anymore. And yet here he was, still affected, still pulled, still not over it. I don't trust you, Taehyun said finally. Jehun nodded. I know. I don't know if I can. I know. And I'm still angry. I know. Taehyun frowned. You keep saying that like it doesn't matter. Jehun's expression softened. It matters. All of it matters. I'm not afraid of it. Taehyun stilled. Why? He asked. Jehun took another step closer. Now, they were close enough to feel each other's presence clearly. Because I'd rather face your anger than live without you again. That broke something. Taehyun's breath caught slightly. You're selfish, he said, but his voice lacked force. Jehun smiled faintly. I've always been. Another silence. Then Taehyun spoke again. Quieter this time. Why didn't you come sooner? Jehun's smile faded. I was afraid. That wasn't what Taehyun expected. Afraid, he repeated. Jehun nodded. Afraid that if I came back. And you still looked at me the same way you did back then. He paused. I wouldn't survive it. Taehyun stared at him. Because that fear, he understood it too well. You think I was afraid? Taehyun said. Jehun's gaze softened. I thought if I saw you again, I would hate you all over again. Taehyun continued. And Jehun asked quietly. Taehyun exhaled. I don't. Silence. Jehun's heart pounded. Then what do you feel? He asked. Taehyun didn't answer immediately. Because putting it into words made it real. I feel tired, he said finally. Tired of holding on to something that doesn't even make sense anymore. Jehun stepped even closer. Now there was barely any space between them. Then let it go, he said softly. Taehyun's eyes lifted. And do what? He asked. Jehun's voice dropped. Come back to me. The world seemed to pause. Because that was everything. Taehyun looked at him. Really looked. At the man he once loved. The man he never truly stopped loving. The man standing in front of him now, not perfect, not flawless, but real. This won't be easy, Taehyun said. I know. We'll fight. I know. We might break again. Jehun held his gaze. Then we'll fix it. Taehyun's chest tightened. You're serious, he said. Jehun nodded. I've always been serious about you. And that was the truth. Taehyun closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. And this time there was no distance. One condition, he said. Jehun straightened slightly. What? No more running. Jehun nodded immediately. Never again. No more silence. I promise. No more letting other people decide for us. Jehun stepped even closer. Only us. A breath. Then Taehyun moved, slowly. Carefully, he lifted his hand and placed it against Jehun's cheek. Jehun froze. Because that touch, he remembered it. Warm. Familiar. Home. You hurt me, Taehyun whispered. Jehun's eyes filled slightly. I know. And I hurt you. Jehun nodded. Yes. A pause. Then Taehyun leaned in. Not rushed. Not desperate. But certain. And finally, after 5 long years, their lips met. Soft at first. Careful. Testing. Then deeper. Like something lost. Being found again. Jehun's hand moved instinctively, gripping Taehyun's shirt lightly. Taehyun pulled him closer. And in that moment, everything else faded. The anger. The pain. The years. Gone. Because this was real. And it had always been real. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing unevenly. We're really doing this, Taehyun said quietly. Jehun smiled softly. Yes. And this time there was no hesitation. From the hallway, a small voice mumbled sleepily. Appa. Papa. They both froze, then looked toward the sound. Minjun stood there half asleep, rubbing his eyes. Are you together? He asked. Silence. Then Taehyun looked at Jehun. Jehun looked at Taehyun. And together they answered. Yes. Minjun smiled. Sleepy. Happy. Then said, Good. And just like that, everything felt right again. Not perfect. Not finished. But right. Because love was never simple. But sometimes it found its way back anyway. Days turned into weeks. And slowly, carefully, things began to change. It didn't happen all at once. There were no sudden we're fine now moments. No perfect peace. They argued. Of course they did. About small things. About schedules. About how Taehyun worked too much. About how Jehun still kept things to himself. But this time they didn't walk away. Stop doing that. Taehyun said one evening, irritation clear in his voice. Jehun looked up from his laptop. Doing what? Shutting down when something bothers you. Jehun frowned slightly. I'm not shutting down. You are. I'm thinking. You always say that. A pause. Then Jehun closed his laptop slowly. Fine. I was upset. Taehyun crossed his arms. About? You missed Minjun's school event. That hit? I told you I had a meeting. You always have meetings. Silence. Taehyun exhaled. I'm trying. Jehun's expression softened slightly. I know. Another pause. But try harder, Jehun said quietly, and this time Taehyun didn't get defensive. Okay, that was the difference. They stayed. They talked. They fixed things. And Minjun noticed everything. Papa smiles more now. He said one afternoon. Taehyun glanced at Jehun. Jehun looked away quickly. You talk more too, Minjun added. Taehyun smirked slightly. Is that a complaint? No, Minjun said seriously. I like it. Jehun's lips curved into a soft smile. Slowly, the house began to feel full again. Jehun started staying over more often. At first, just weekends. Then more days. Until one night, Minjun said out loud, Papa, why don't you just stay forever? Silence. Taehyun looked at Jehun. Jehun looked at Taehyun. And this time, neither of them avoided it. What do you think? Taehyun asked quietly. Jehun's heart pounded. I think. He hesitated. I like that. Minjun gasped dramatically. Really? Taehyun sighed. We'll try. That was enough, and just like that, Jehun moved back in. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but naturally, like he had always belonged there. Months passed, and for the first time in years, they were a family again. Not perfect, but real. Taehyun still worked too much. Jehun still overthought things. Minjun was still dramatic, but now, they handled it together, and love slowly returned. One night, it changed again. Jehun stood in the bathroom, staring at the small stick in his hand. His heart was racing. Too fast. Too loud, 2 lines positive. He laughed softly, then covered his mouth, because suddenly his eyes were filled with tears. No way, he whispered. Another baby, after everything, after 5 years, after rebuilding. Life was giving him another chance. But this time he was scared, not because he didn't want it, but because what if things broke again? What if Taehyun's voice, outside the door. Jehun froze. Are you okay? Taehyun asked. Jehun looked at the test again, then took a breath. Come in. The door opened. Taehyun stepped in, concern already on his face. What happened? Jehun didn't speak immediately. He just walked closer and placed the test in Taehyun's hand. Taehyun frowned slightly, then looked down and froze. Silence, long, heavy. Jehun swallowed. I just found out. Taehyun looked up at him slowly. You're... Jehun nodded. Pregnant. The words settled between them. Taehyun didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. And for a second, Jehun panicked. Say something, he whispered. Taehyun blinked. Then suddenly he laughed. Soft at first, then deeper. Not disbelief, not shock, relief. We're having another baby, he said. Jehun's breast shook. Yes. Taehyun stepped forward immediately, pulling him into his arms. Careful, protective, like before. Hey, Taehyun murmured, feeling Jehun trembling slightly. Why are you shaking? Jehun bared his face against his chest. I was scared. Taehyun tightened his hold. Don't be. What if something goes wrong again? Jehun whispered. Taehyun pulled back slightly, looking at him. Seriously, this time, he said, we don't let anything come between us. Jehun's eyes filled. No misunderstandings. Taehyun continued. No silence. No leaving. Jehun nodded. Together, he whispered. Taehyun smiled softly. Always, from the doorway, a small voice spoke. What are you doing? They both turned. Minjun stood there. Curious. Jehun laughed softly through his tears. Come here. Minjun walked in slowly, looking between them. What happened? Taehyun knelt slightly. You're gonna be a big brother. Silence. Then Minjun gasped. Really? Jehun laughed. Yes. Minjun jumped. I'm a big brother. Taehyun shook his head, smiling. And in that moment, everything felt complete. Not perfect, not flawless, but full, because this time they didn't lose each other. They chose each other. Again, and again, and again. And as Jehun leaned into Taehyun and Minjun wrapped himself around both of them, it was clear their story didn't end with heartbreak. It continued with love, with family, with second chances. And this time they were ready, and that's where the story ends. Or maybe where it truly begins. Thank you for listening to NaaWrites, where love is never simple. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next story.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to share and tell your friend about the channel. See you guys in the next video. Bye.